I've always found it very strange when people say we need to criminalize drugs because drugs ruin people's lives and they ruin the lives of their family members and a whole variety of other people. And I guess it can be true. It certainly is true that sometimes drug use does harm the individual and it can harm their family. But taking people who use drugs and putting them in the criminal court system and turning them into felons and then sticking them into a cage actually harms them a great deal as well. And so it's really weird to say, well, we're helping people, we're doing this out of concern for them, we want to prevent harm from them being done to them, and our solution is to imprison them and take them away from their families. The other thing is there's an assumption embedded in that mindset that's really quite dubious that says that if we legalize drug usage, then it'll mean that fewer people do drugs. I think even if it meant that more people would do drugs, criminalization is still an evil. But there's lots of empirical evidence that calls that assumption into question. I actually did field research for the Cato Institute in 2008 and 2009 by going to Portugal, which was the first Western country to decriminalize all drugs, not just marijuana, but all drugs, including heroin, methamphetamines, cocaine. And in virtually every case, not just the social pathologies related to drugs, but drug usage itself decreased after Portugal implemented a system of decriminalization. And if you talk to the policymakers, what they actually say is that that was true for two reasons. One is that when you criminalize drug usage, you tell drug users, you have a reason to fear us, the state, with good reason. We'll put you into jail if we catch you. Which means that they run away from the state, they turn off from the state becomes their enemy. When you decriminalize, they become much more open to things like education campaigns about how to reduce the harms of drugs or the risk of drugs, or even to be persuaded not to use drugs in the first place. But the bigger reason is that if you don't use all your money paying prosecutors and police officers and prison guards to create this penal state of mass incarceration, you free up huge amounts of money that you can spend on much more constructive usages like drug counseling for people who want it, or methadone clinics, or all sorts of other ways to reduce the harms of drugs. And then finally, I always just find it so bizarre. Obviously, alcohol, not just prescription drugs, but alcohol in excess causes enormous damage, yet no one thinks we should criminalize that, and for good reason, because we had this hideous experiment with Prohibition where we learned that all of the harms from alcohol that were so upsetting, such as violence and gang warfare and the like, came not from alcohol but from Prohibition itself, and that's obviously the same today.